All right, here we are, week 11. This is our SQL lesson on SQL stored procedures and user-defined functions. Uh, I want to start off by saying that this is kind of out of the scope of the class. I'm not expecting you guys, this is not going to be on a test. I'm not expecting you guys to do this. It's just kind of I wanted to show you neat to know things that, some SQL functionality that's a little bit beyond what we learned in the classes. So let's go ahead and pop over to the slide deck. Okay, SQL store procedures, user-defined functions. Okay, we're going to start with store procedures. A store procedure is a method for executing a script in SQL. Uh, it's a lot like a view that you're basically storing a query. But store procedures can take inputs or parameters, which that allows for a lot more flexibility. The basic syntax here is create procedure, name the procedure as, and then make your SQL statement. Let's go ahead and look over here. As you can see, I made one here. Create procedure tool orders as select custom orders from where department. And then to execute it, I use this command execute tool orders. Let's pop into our SQL server so you can see this in action. All right, so here we go. Create a stored procedure, tool orders. What we got here is, see, I made this, this is just a very simple query right here, where I've taken from our cust orders and I've said I only want stuff from the department of tools. So if I create this in a stored procedure, and I've already done this, so I can't really run it, but you'll see, if you look over here, I know this is an eye chart on this website, but if I refresh here, you're going to see under programmability, I have something called stored procedures, and you'll see these two stored procedures I made. This first one's tool orders. So in order to run the stored procedure, all I do is execute tool orders. And there you go. You'll get it to run down here so you can see it, and that it returns everything with tools. Okay, let's go back to the slide deck. And, I know you're looking at this going, why would I do this when I could just view? That's what we're going to explain next. All right, so, and as I said, you can find your stored procedures under programmability stored procedures in your database. Uh, Unlike a view, a store procedure can include a parameter. This makes them much more flexible. You can basically package a query that can run anything. So let's go ahead, let's dig over, let's pop back over to the SQL Server and we'll look at the code to give a function. Okay. All right. So we did this basic one. Just create procedure as, put a query, that's it. And then you just run it by saying execute the store procedure. Same thing, we're going to start, create procedure as, name it. And now, since we want a parameter, we're going to tell it what parameter do we want it to have here. So we're going to say, I want a parameter called department. Now, variables or parameters, whatever you want to call them in SQL, start with the @ sign. The ampersand, that not ampersand, I'm sorry, it's the @ sign. It sits above the number 2 on your computer keyboard. So you got to say the name of the variable you want and then declare what the variable is going to be. I'm going to declare this is going to be an nvarchar 255. Could be an int, could be a date, could be anything. All right. And then we sit there and as. So this is all the same. We just added this one line here. We've added a variable. And then we're going to say select from cust orders where department equals, and there's the variable again. Okay. So when I run this one, which I've already done, and I store it, I can now run this. I can now execute department orders, and then I put the department equals, and I put electronics. If I run this, it'll return electronics. I can change this, and I can have it run tools. And remember, SQL is not case sensitive, so it doesn't have to matter. And there you go, tools. So that's the cool thing. So you can sit there, you can make a query that has a filtering mechanism. And especially when you're making a much more complex query with a lot of joins and stuff, then you can just save it as a stored procedure. Then you can just run it whenever you want, or anybody else on the team can run it that maybe isn't as SQL savvy as you are. So that's the cool thing about stored procedures is that you can pass parameters and values. And obviously, it gets much more complex than this. In fact, like I have stored procedures at work where I call a stored procedure for within my stored procedure. So it can get very complex. But again, this is not being tested by you on you. You don't have to worry about this for the final. I want you to see it because it's kind of a cool thing that we can do in SQL. So you can see beyond just what the basics of SQL are. Okay. So let me go ahead and let's see. Get back to that. All right. So unlike a view, stored procedure can include a parameter, making them more flexible. We were going to. It's Monday. All right, so next we're going to do user-defined functions. Now we already know what functions are because you've already built some. You've used already count, average, sum, min. These are all functions. They're built into SQL Server, okay? But we can create our own. And I've got one over here I created, and I'm going to pop over to SQL Server to show you how it works. And we'll get into the syntax of the whole thing. 1 second here. Let's go ahead and SQL Server. Where am I? Oh, all right. So for a user-defined function, we have the syntax if we say create function, and I name it. So kind of the same I've already done. Now the parameters we're going to pass through, I'm going to put them up here, and I put them in parentheses. Okay. Notice I have num1 and num2, and they're both integers. They're separated by a comma. Okay. Here's what's a different thing here. Now we have returns integer. Now, if you guys have taken Java, Python, that kind of thing, you'll know when you have like functions or modules, you have to have a return of what comes out of it, because otherwise the variable just sits inside there and nothing happens. So then we say returns integer as, and then we'll skip a begin and an end. Okay, so this is another function thing. So this makes something new you've seen. This indentation I'm doing is not required. It just helps you see what's going on. And in here I have return, and then I say number1 plus number2. So if I run this, which I've already done, it'll create a function, which you'll be able to find down here. Right underneath stored procedures, you're going to see functions. So we got base functions, aggregate, system functions. Let's see if I can refresh. And these are hidden under scalar value functions because they return a scalar value. And a scalar, it means a single value type thing return. You're not returning that it's a mathematical term. It means that instead of a vector, which a vector will have a value plus a direction type of thing. This is just going to return a single value type thing. So, but that's where they sit. You can find them in there. It'll tell you what parameters you have. Okay. And notice it says no default. You could set a default value in there if you wanted to, so that if somebody didn't give a value, you could set it. But anyway, run this. You do a select function. You say select. Now notice I have the DBO here in front of my add up because this has to know that this is not a built-in function. You got to let it know this is part of my database. So put the DBO in there, add up, and then I get 2 values. And then the as added, that's obviously just aliasing. So when I execute this, it returns 5. So if I change this to, I don't know, we'll change it to 54 and 2, and then we'll run that again, and it returns 56. Okay, so that we created a basic function. Let's go back to the slide deck now. Okay. And again, this is not going to be on your test, but I just want you to see it. So the syntax for a user-defined function is create function, give it a name. Your variables, if you have more than one, you're going to put them in a comma separated. The data type returns, what kind of data type you're returning as. Then you have a begin and an end, and inside the begin and the end, you're going to have returns with some kind of action in here. Okay, so you see our action in here was to add 2 numbers together. Let's look at another version. Let's look at month. Basically, I'm recreating the month function as myself. This is there's already have a SQL month function that'll do this. You type in a date and it'll return the integer of the month. So I create a function I named it mnth, so it wouldn't get confused there. DT is my variable parameter. As date's the value, is the data type. It returns an integer. I say begin and I say return, then I use the actual month function in there of the DT. So, I mean, I'm really just cheating here, but anyway. So, and then to get it, select DVO month and get date. Get date, if you've never run it here, I'll go run it on SQL Server so you can see what it does. So here's the function I did, but let's just go ahead and you can just do select get date. And this will return today's date. So you see it returns, I did this today, it's the 14th of November at 3 o'clock and 3:20. So if I do this now, it'll return simply 11. Okay. Now the next one I did, we can go to the slide for this. We're going to do it a little bit different, add a little more. And this, again, I know this is like, you're probably looking at this going, what the heck am I doing? This is kind of cool. It's a little more confusing, but we'll walk through it. We're going to create a function called month year, and we bring in our date as our date. So we're kind of the same here. We're just bringing in a date. We're going to return this time, we're going to return a varchar 8. Okay, so that means a character up to 8 characters long. And we're going to say as with the begin, return. Now, cast, you notice each of these, they're nested. So let's start in the middle here. Let's always, when you look at a nested thing, it's always better just to start in the middle and kind of work your way out so you understand what's going on. So what I've taken is my variable, and I'm running the month function. That'll return 11, as we saw up here, and I'm going to got the year function, and I'm passing the parameter to the year as well, so that'll return the year, and I've got a hyphen in the middle there, okay? And now I've got a concat around it, wrapped around that. Concat means to concatenate. So that means to take this number, put the hyphen in the middle, then put the string after it. So that's how you concat something. And if you wanted to have spaces in between them, you could actually put a space there, but I don't want that. So, all right, so that's what concat means. Then finally, cast. Cast means, well, if I want to make sure, because these are coming out as integers, and then I have this dash in the middle. So I have to tell SQL Server, listen, just make this a string so you don't have to worry about converting or collisions or weird data types. So cast, and I'm out here as varchar 8. So that's what, so that's what this is all going to. So we're going to cast to varchar 8. So I've already run this. So now when I run this part right here, I'm going to get 1122. Okay. So that's a function and a stored procedure. And again, don't stress yourself out about these. You're not going to worry about them on the test. They're just kind of cool. And maybe on a final, if you come up with a cool idea that a stored procedure could work from, come to me and we'll kind of work it out for the final project. But I just wanted to say, not required for test. This lesson was just informational. I just want to demonstrate the programming power of SQL. And I look forward to seeing you guys in the next class. Thanks a lot.